So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Katarzyna Piskorek. I'm a researcher at TU Delft in the Netherlands, but I'm originally graduated from Wrocław University of Technology. I'm very, very happy to be involved in this Congress, although it's happening online. For me. I would like to. Unfortunately, I was not able to follow the presentation of Professor Domański before my presentation. Therefore, I don't know what was the context set already. So please forgive me if there will be no relations made within my presentation. I would like to tell you a little bit about knowledge flows from the academic perspective. But learn through practical processes. So starting with, to explain the whole concept of knowledge flows or knowledge transfer or knowledge exchange, I would like to draw the attention, your attention on connectivity, implementation, and effects. These three aspects are very important in the knowledge flows. Knowledge flows basically refers more to this connectivity, while knowledge transfer a little bit more on implementation. But what we are really interested in are the effects. So what we gained, what we learned, and what are the effects of implemented solution. I apologize that I'm mentioning pizza before lunch, but I hope you can forgive me, because I'm going to use it just as a very simple example of implementation of knowledge exchange and implementation of the concept. We all know the traditional pizza is very simple and was traveling across the world and get all possible shapes and sizes. So sometimes it was only just adding something that matches the local context using the core concept, like adding pineapple, whatever it's acceptable in the original country of pizza or not, but apparently in some contexts it's very much desirable. Or is it just keeping the frame, but the core concept is becoming a little bit different, like in the case of American fat pizza? Or is it just using the name, like in case of Turkish pizza, which is actually original dish called lakam, but because of the branding, it just becomes more popular. So knowledge flows occur whenever an idea generated in a certain institution or certain region travels to another institution, is learned by another institution or in another region. Of course, like I mentioned before, we are very much interested in the effects of those implementations and on those ideas. And why isn't it just as simple as taking an idea from one place if it's working well and using it in another context? This is, of course, very much supported by European Union. There are several big programs that are supporting implementation of lessons learned, of knowledge exchange. They're generating flows, but the process is very much different in different regions. And this is happening because regions themselves are different. Their structures are different, like industrial, social, urban structure. Their access to other regions, their connections with other regions may vary, and their ability to interact with other regions can also be different. What's also important that regional development is very much path dependent. So the history of the region matters, and it influences and shapes a lot the capacity for knowledge transfer of each region. And of course, knowledge needs and knowledge generation are not evenly dispersed among those regions. So this is not just as simple as transferring idea from region A to region B in a linear way. It's more about creating, it's more about the co-creation of knowledge. It's more about involving different stakeholders and to achieve shared understandings. So this, within several projects, we've been researching on the topic of research of knowledge flows or knowledge transfer. The topic of co-creation became a very, very important one. And the whole process of transferring knowledge became a little bit more complicated in the end, but it influenced a lot the effectiveness of used solution. So the process starting with co-exploring different contexts from each partnering regions, then co-designing, co-production, co-decisions, and co-governance in the end. These all co-elements are very important mainly because of the gathering of understanding of the concept. So to avoid the direct translation, there is a lot of interactions and a lot of exchange of information in a way before the concept is actually being introduced. This is also very much visible in the connection between the place specificity of the solution and transferability of the solution. So the more the solution is related to the context, the more effective the transfer could be. On the other hand, if we are talking about those specific, very much related to a certain place solutions, the adaptation of the complete solution, so in a way direct translation, can be very poor in effects. But if we are using elements of the solutions that could work in our context, the effectiveness is increasing. And it's increasing even further if we are trying to reasonably approach the methodology and use just those processes and guides for successful implementation. So as a conclusion, the main barriers for knowledge transfer could be those regulations, technical, spatial, or institutional preconditions, mismatch of level of development between the regions, their objectives or their needs. Of course, also the language could be a huge barrier, even nowadays. But we also have some facilitators. The most important element that is really supporting knowledge transfer is interactive engagement. The more interaction, the more effective the process is. Also, more face-to-face interactions that we just learned that they are very important to the process of learning, especially now after the COVID, when we had to limit those or even exclude them from the process. And the same goes with the site visit. There is also one trap that I would like to mention that could be in many cases institutions or regions have been falling for, so-called good practices. Good practice, to be understood and to be implemented correctly, has to be taken with the whole context, very broad context. So this is not something that can be just used from in a certain place because it worked in another. This is something that needs always adaptation. And with perhaps with this statement about good practices not being so good always, I would like to finish my presentation. Thank you very much.